Interleague play is now held throughout the season. In 2000, the AL and NL were dissolved as legal entities, and MLB became the single, overall league de jure, similar to the National Football League NFL, National Basketball Association NBA, and National Hockey League NHL, albeit with two components called leagues instead of conferences. The same rules and regulations are used in both leagues, with one former exception. The AL operated under the designated hitter DH rule, while the NL did not. This difference in rules between leagues was unique to MLB, as the other major professional sports leagues in the US and Canada have one set of rules for all teams. Citation needed. In 2020, the National League NL used the designated hitter DH rule for the first time, as part of the settlement of the 2021-22 Major League Baseball lockout. This change was made permanent, thus making the rules in the two leagues identical. Founding in the 1860s, aided by soldiers playing the game in camp during the Civil War, New York-style baseball expanded into a national game and spawned baseball's first governing body, the National Association of Baseball Players (NABBP). The NABBP existed as an amateur league for 12 years. By 1867, more than 400 clubs were members. Most of the strongest clubs remained those based in the northeastern United States. For professional baseball's founding year, MLB uses the year 1869 when the first professional team, the Cincinnati Red Stockings, was established. The schism developed between professional and amateur ball players after the founding of the Cincinnati Club. The NABBP split into an amateur organization and a professional organization. The National Association of Professional Baseball Players, often known as the National Association, was formed in 1871. Its amateur counterpart disappeared after only a few years. The modern Chicago Cubs and Atlanta Braves franchises trace their histories back to the National Association of Professional Baseball Players in the 1870s. In 1876, the National League of Professional Baseball Clubs, later known as the National League or NL, was established after the proved ineffective. The league placed its emphasis on clubs rather than on players. Clubs could now enforce player contracts, preventing players from jumping to higher-paying clubs. Clubs were required to play the full schedule of games instead of forfeiting scheduled games when the club was no longer in the running for the league championship, which happened frequently under the NA. A concerted effort was made to curb gambling on games, which was leaving the validity of results in doubt. The first game in the NL on Saturday, April 22, 1876 at Jefferson Street grounds in Philadelphia is often pointed to as the beginning of MLB. The early years of the NL were tumultuous, with threats from rival leagues and a rebellion by players against the hated reserve clause, which restricted the free movement of players between clubs. Teams came and went. 1882 was the first season where the league's membership was the same as the preceding seasons, and only 4 franchises survived to see 1900. Competitor leagues formed regularly and also disbanded regularly. The most successful was the American Association 1882 to 1891, sometimes called the Beer and Whiskey League for its tolerance of the sale of alcoholic beverages to spectators. For several years, the NL and American Association champions met in a postseason championship series, the first attempt at a World Series. The two leagues merged in 1892 as a single 12-team NL, but the NL dropped 4 teams after the 1899 season. This led to the formation of the American League in 1901 under AL President Ben Johnson, and the resulting bidding war for players led to widespread contract breaking and legal disputes. The war between the AL and NL caused shock waves throughout the baseball world. At a meeting at the Leland Hotel in Chicago in 1901, the other baseball leagues negotiated a plan to maintain their independence. A new national association was formed to oversee these minor leagues. After 1902, the NL, AL, and NA signed a new national agreement which tied independent contracts to the reserve clause contracts. The agreement also set up a formal classification system for minor leagues, the forerunner of today's system that was refined by Branch Rickey. Regular season: each team plays 162 games per season. A team's schedule is typically organized into 3-game series, sets of consecutive games against the same opponent, with occasional 2- or 4-game series. Postponed games or continuations of suspended games can result in an 80-hawk 1-game or 5-game series. All games of a series are usually hosted by the same team and multiple series are typically grouped together. IS, the team usually hosts several series in a row, called a homestand, and follows that by going on several road series in a row. Teams generally play games 5 to 7 days per week. Most games are scheduled at night, although teams will often play day games on opening day, holidays, and for the last game of a series to allow teams extra time to travel to their next opponent. Sunday games are generally played during the afternoon, allowing teams to travel to their next destination prior to a Monday night game. In the current three-division structure, each team plays 19 games against each of its 4 divisional opponents. It plays 1 home series and 1 away series, amounting to 6 or 7 games, against the 10 other teams in its league. The team also plays one of the divisions in the other league, rotating each year, with 2 opponents in a 3-game home series, 2 in the 3-game away series, and 1 with 4 games split between home and away. Furthermore, each team has an interleague natural rival, in many cases its counterpart in the same metro area, with which it plays 2 home games and 2 away games each year. With an odd number of teams in each league, it is necessary to have 2 teams participate in interleague play for most days in the season, except when 2 or more teams have a day off. Each team plays 20 interleague games throughout the season, usually with just 1 interleague game per day, but for 1 weekend in late May, all teams will participate in an interleague series. Before 2013, interleague play was structured differently. There would be 1 weekend in mid-May and another period consisting typically of the last 2/3 of June, in which all teams played interleague games save for 2 NL teams each day, and no interleague games were scheduled outside those dates. Before 2013, season-long interleague play was not necessary, because each league had an even number of teams. In 2013, the Houston Astros moved to the American League, so that each league would have 15 teams. Prior to the adoption of the universal designated hitter in 2022, whether the DH was in use depended on whether the home team was from the AL, where the DH was used, or the NL, where it was not. Starting with the 2023 season, the scheduling formula is set to change, with each team playing at least 1 series against every other team every year. Each team will play 14 games against teams in the same division, with 1 3-game and 1 4-game series at each park, 6 games against teams within the same league but in other divisions, with 1 3-game series at each park, and 1 3-game series against teams in the other league, alternating home teams each year, except for each team's designated interleague rival, which will continue to consist of 2 2-game series at each of the team's home parks. Beginning with the 2022 season, teams compete for the 6 playoff berths in their respective leagues. To secure a berth, the team must either win its division or capture a wild card spot by having one of the 3 best records among the non-winners in its entire league. With the adoption of a 3rd wild card, the former practice of breaking ties with an additional regular season game, known as Game 163, was dropped in favor of a tiebreaker formula.